The first lesson they teach at the Crucible is that pain is a privilege. Only the strong earn the right to feel it. The weak? They don't make it past the first hour. Cain Voss stood at attention, shoulders squared, his heartbeat a steady thrum in his ears. The air in the combat chamber was sterile, artificial, but beneath it lurked the unmistakable scent of sweat, scorched metal, and something more primal, fear. The kind that clung to the walls after years of agony, death, and failure. A towering, four-armed reptilian instructor, encased in chitinous black armor, paced before the assembled recruits. 20 of them, aliens from across the Dominion's war-hardened factions. And Cain, the lone human, standing at the end of the line like a bad joke. This is the Crucible. You do not train here. You survive. Or you die. The instructor's voice was a gravel grind of amusement and scorn. His slit-pupiled gaze flicked toward Cain. That will be especially true for you, human. Cain didn't flinch. He had expected hostility, but the room crackled with something worse, anticipation. They wanted to see him fail. Your first trial begins now. The floor beneath them split open with a hydraulic hiss. The ground vanished. Cain plunged into darkness. He hit the ground hard, rolling to break his fall. The chamber they'd been dropped into was massive, a simulated battlefield littered with broken machinery, jagged terrain, and cover points. Overhead, crimson emergency lights bathed the ruins in an eerie glow. A voice crackled over unseen speakers. First lesson: kill or be killed. Then the gunfire started. Cain dove behind a slab of wreckage as plasma rounds sliced through the air, scorching craters into the metallic ground. Screams erupted, one cadet already down. He peeked over the edge, spotting a Corvian warrior, 7 feet of muscle and speed, rushing toward an injured recruit, talons gleaming. No hesitation. A swift slash. Blood hit the floor. So it's like that, huh? Cain's training kicked in. He wasn't the fastest, or the strongest, but humans had something these bastards didn't: unpredictability. He scanned the battlefield. Most of the aliens had bolted for high ground or cover, engaging in raw, brutal skirmishes. Cain, however, stayed low, moving between the debris, assessing patterns. The Dominion elites fought with precision, drilled into tactics honed over centuries. They engaged head-on, valuing dominance over deception. Cain would use that. A Trogar brawler, hulking, tusked, and overconfident, charged toward him, swinging a brutal arc with his plasma axe. Cain sidestepped at the last second, letting the momentum carry the brute forward. With a precise kick to the back of the knee, he sent the Trogar stumbling, then snatched a jagged metal shard from the ground and drove it into the alien's exposed throat. A gurgle. A collapse. One down. No time to hesitate. A Sethi sniper locked onto him from above. Cain moved before the shot fired, rolling into cover. Plasma scorched the ground where he had been a second earlier. They're tracking me. He counted to 3, then grabbed the fallen Trogar's weapon. It was heavy, unwieldy, meant for something twice his size, but it didn't matter. Cain aimed. Fired. The blast caught the Sethi mid-reload, slamming the insectoid warrior backward. They screeched, mandibles clattering, before tumbling off their perch. 2 down. The battlefield was shifting. He could feel it. The aliens weren't just treating him like a weakling anymore. They were watching. Studying him. And one of them was already planning his execution. A shadow fell over him. Cypher Atrax. The Dominion's golden prodigy, the best of the Crucible's elite. Tall, sleek, and clad in midnight black combat armor, his presence alone sent an unmistakable message: this is the real test. Cain's grip tightened around his stolen weapon. The other cadets paused, as if instinctively aware that the fight had changed. Some shifted away, unwilling to stand between them. Cypher tilted his head. You're smarter than you look. Cain exhaled slowly. And you talk more than I expected. The alien smiled. Don't mistake survival for victory, human. You are a curiosity, nothing more. And curiosities do not last. No more words. Cypher lunged. Kane barely ducked the first strike, a blur of motion too fast to track. He twisted, barely evading the follow-up. The force of the attacks alone sent a shockwave through the ground. Knew he'd be strong. Didn't know he'd be this fast. Kane backed up, forcing himself to analyze, anticipate. Sci-Fi was methodical, relentless, but there was a pattern. A fraction of a second between each strike. A half-step pivot before each kick. Kane grinned. Predictable. He dodged left, feigned right. Sci-Fi adjusted, exactly as expected. That was his mistake. Kane dropped low, sweeping Sci-Fi's legs out from under him. The Dominion prodigy crashed down, and before he could recover, Kane slammed the stolen plasma rifle into his chest, pinning him. The barrel hummed against his throat. For the first time, silence. The other cadets stared. No one had ever bested Sci-Fi Atrax. Kane leaned in, his voice low. You don't think humans belong here? That's fine. He pressed the barrel deeper. But after today, you're going to remember my name. A slow clap echoed across the battlefield. The instructor's voice crackled over the comms, amused. Well, looks like the human lives to see another day. A hatch in the ceiling rumbled open. The simulation was over. The survivors, less than half the original group, were lifted back to the main training hall. As Kane stepped off the platform, the other recruits avoided his gaze. Some in fear. Others in silent recognition. Sci-Fi, standing now, wiped the blood from his lip. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked intrigued. This isn't over, he said. Kane smirked. Didn't think it was. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the weight of the battle settle in. He had survived the Crucible's first trial. Now came the real war. Pain radiated through Kane's ribs as he dropped onto his bunk. His muscles screamed, bruises blooming across his body like a battlefield map. He let out a slow breath, forcing himself to relax, but his mind refused to rest. The first trial was over. He had survived. He had even won. But the Dominion didn't care about victories. They wanted dominance. And Kane Voss had just made himself a problem. The dormitory was a brutalist nightmare, cold steel, sharp angles, and walls embedded with surveillance nodes. The Crucible wasted no resources on comfort. If you wanted to rest, you had to earn it. Footsteps approached. Kane didn't look up. He knew the pattern of that stride now. Sci-Fi Atrax. You fight like an animal, the alien said, his tone edged with something Kane hadn't expected, curiosity. Kane smirked, eyes still closed. Guess that makes you the guy who got his ass kicked by one. Silence stretched. Then a quiet chuckle. You are reckless, undisciplined, inferior in every measurable way. And yet, Sci-Fi sat on the edge of the opposite bunk, watching him. You won. Kane opened one eye. Was that a compliment? It was an anomaly, Sci-Fi said. One I intend to correct. Kane sat up, rolling his shoulders. By all means. I'm always happy to disappoint you. Sci-Fi studied him, expression unreadable. You don't understand what you've done, human. Kane shrugged. Beat the golden boy? Pissed off the right people? You disrupted the order. Sci-Fi leaned forward. The Crucible operates on hierarchy. Dominion elites at the top. The strong survive, the weak are purged. You don't belong in the equation. Kane's grin sharpened. Then rewrite the damn equation. Sci-Fi exhaled through his nose. You think this is a game? I think it's a test. And I don't lose tests. Sci-Fi's gaze darkened. Then you're already dead. A sharp chime rang out, cutting through the tension. Overhead, a cold mechanical voice announced. Next trial commences in 1 hour. Cadets, prepare. Sci-Fi stood. Try not to die before I break you myself. Kane leaned back against the bunk, watching him leave. Try not to be disappointed when I don't. Trial 2, the gauntlet. The chamber was larger this time. Darker. The walls thrummed with energy, arcs of electricity crackling along the metal framework. Towers of shifting platforms jutted from the floor, rearranging themselves in real time. It's a kill box. Kane flexed his fingers, rolling his neck. His instincts screamed trap. A metallic clang echoed as the chamber doors sealed. The Dominion instructors stood above, shadowed figures behind reinforced glass. The alien recruits spread out, weapons drawn. Then the rules flashed on the overhead display. Trial 2, the Gauntlet. Objective, reach the exit. Obstacles, environmental hazards, AI kill drones, and each other. Survivors, 50% maximum. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The room exploded into chaos. Kane sprinted left as the floor beneath him jolted, entire sections dropping out into bottomless pits. A Sethi warrior shrieked as they miscalculated a jump, vanishing into the abyss. No second chances. No mercy. A hovering drone locked onto Kane's position, plasma turrets spinning. He lunged behind cover as a barrage of energy blasts turned his previous spot into molten slag. Gotta move. He vaulted onto a shifting platform, nearly losing balance as it jerked upward. The Dominion recruits moved with brutal efficiency, climbing, cutting down rivals, adapting with military precision. Kane had to be faster. Smarter. A Trogar brute barreled toward him. Kane ducked low, sidestepped, and redirected the momentum, sending the alien sprawling into an incoming kill drone's path. The machine responded instantly, firing into the massive warrior's chest. The Trogar hit the ground, smoking. One less competitor. Kane climbed higher, scanning for Sci-Fi. He spotted him near the top, easily maneuvering the platforms, cutting down opposition like they were nothing. His skill was undeniable. But Kane wasn't playing the same game. Sci-Fi was fighting to win. Kane was fighting to survive. A screeching noise snapped his focus downward, 2 AI drones swarming toward him. He had seconds to react. He grabbed a fallen energy blade from a dead recruit and leapt. The drones adjusted, tracking his movement. Kane twisted midair, slicing through the first drone in a single arc. The second fired, a bolt scorching past his shoulder, but he landed hard, rolled, and drove the blade through its core before it could process his location. The explosion knocked him backward. He coughed, staggering to his feet. His arms burned from the exertion. Every inch of his body ached. He kept moving. The finish line was in sight, a towering exit gate pulsing with red light. Only 6 of them left. Kane, Sci-Fi, and 4 others. Kane took a step forward. The ground shifted. The final trial had begun. The platforms beneath them collapsed, leaving only a narrow bridge leading to the exit. Sci-Fi stood at the far end, waiting. Of course. Kane exhaled. Guess we're doing this now. The last 4 recruits barely hesitated. They charged, desperate to reach the gate. Sci-Fi barely moved. The first fighter lunged. Sci-Fi sidestepped, his blade severing an artery in a single motion. The recruit crumpled. The second tried to go around. Sci-Fi caught them mid-motion, snapping their arm before kicking them off the bridge. The third hesitated. That was their mistake. Sci-Fi's blade impaled them before they could decide whether to run or fight. 3 bodies hit the floor. Kane cracked his neck. You sure you want to waste all that energy before you fight me? Sci-Fi's lips curled. It wasn't wasted. Kane rolled his shoulders. All right. Let's see if you can finish the job this time. Sci-Fi attacked first, fast and ruthless. Kane barely blocked the first strike, the force rattling his bones. They moved like predators, testing, countering, adjusting. Sci-Fi was stronger. Faster. But Kane was unpredictable. He let Sci-Fi press forward, absorbing the momentum, then abruptly sidestepped, forcing the Dominion warrior off balance. Kane drove an elbow into his ribs, making him grunt. Sci-Fi retaliated, sweeping Kane's legs out from under him. Kane hit the bridge hard, vision sparking. Move. He twisted as Sci-Fi's blade came down, barely missing his throat. Kane kicked upward, striking his opponent's wrist. The weapon clattered away. Both of them scrambled back to their feet. Bruised. Bleeding. Kane grinned. Hell of a dance. Sci-Fi exhaled. You're still standing. Yeah. Kane spat blood. Pisses you off, doesn't it? Sci-Fi didn't reply. He just turned toward the exit and walked away. The trial was over. Kane had survived. Again. But this time, it wasn't just survival. It was respect. Kane stood in the shadow of the towering arena, the final test of the crucible. His breath fogged the cold air, every exhale a reminder that he was still alive, still fighting. The arena stretched out before him, a shifting landscape of treacherous terrain, weapon caches, and automated turrets. Overhead, the observation deck gleamed, packed with Dominion elites who had gathered to witness the spectacle. They expected him to fail. He flexed his fingers, the leather of his gloves creaking. His body ached from the trials, the bruises, the burns, the sleepless nights filled with the hum of kill drones patrolling his bunk. His mind was sharp, though. Focused. Every setback had been a lesson, every scar a reminder that he wasn't here to compete. He was here to win. A chime echoed, and the arena hummed to life. Platforms rose, walls shifted, and hidden traps armed themselves with mechanical precision. The voice of the head instructor, a grizzled veteran of the Dominion Wars, cut through the noise. Final trial, the war game. Command your troops. Seize the objective. Survive. Kane's visor flickered as the AI interface activated. His team, 6 cadets, a mix of the survivors, materialized in his HUD. Sci-Fi Atrax led the opposing force, his team a hardened elite of the best Dominion recruits. The rules were simple. The first to capture the control point at the center of the arena would earn victory and survival. Kane, orders? A voice crackled through his earpiece. It was Thrix, a wiry Sethi who had fought beside him during the last trial. Her chitinous armor gleamed under the harsh lights. Hold formation, Kane replied, his voice steady. We let them make the first move. On the opposite side, Sci-Fi's forces spread out in a classic Dominion wedge, an impenetrable formation that crushed opposition through sheer force. Predictable. Kane had expected nothing less. A soft beep warned him of an incoming transmission. Human. Sci-Fi's voice was cold, clinical. There is no shame in surrender. You've survived longer than you should have. I'll make it quick. Kane smiled. Funny. I was about to say the same to you. The transmission cut off. Sci-Fi's forces advanced. The first engagement was swift and brutal. Sci-Fi's team pushed hard, their precision staggering. They moved like a machine, covering each angle, pushing Kane's team back into defensive positions. Plasma fire ripped through metal, and the smell of scorched circuits filled the air. Hold the line! Kane barked. His team fell back, using the shifting terrain to break line of sight. Thrix and another recruit, a bulky Trogar named Orin, laid down suppressive fire. Kane wasn't retreating. He was drawing them in. He scanned the map overlay, watching Sci-Fi's position. The Dominion commander led from the front, fearless, but overconfident. Thrix set a charge on Grid C, Orin, funnel them left. A beat of hesitation then. Copy that. The trap set, Kane took position on a high platform, eyes fixed on the unfolding chaos below. His team moved as he directed, pulling Sci-Fi's forces into a narrow choke point. Then he triggered the charge. The explosion was thunderous. Metal and debris tore through the air, and 2 of Sci-Fi's cadets vanished in a cloud of smoke. The formation fractured. Kane's team surged forward, capitalizing on the confusion. A firefight erupted, every shot precise. Kane moved through it like a ghost, quick and deliberate. His blade cut through armor, his rifle barked, and each shot found its mark. His team mirrored his actions. Where he pushed, they followed. Where he fell back, they covered. One by one, Sci-Fi's forces dropped. The wedge became a line, then a scattered mess. The control point loomed ahead, a pulsing beacon in the heart of the arena. Victory was close. Secure the objective! Kane ordered. His team surged forward, covering each other with disciplined fire. Sci-Fi remained, his silhouette a dark shadow against the red haze of the battleground. Kane met his gaze through the smoke. Fall back! Sci-Fi commanded his last two soldiers. They hesitated, then obeyed. It was just the two of them now. Kane stepped forward, his weapon lowered. He wanted this face to face. Sci-Fi mirrored him, blade in hand. You think this changes anything? It changes everything, Kane replied. This isn't just a win. It's proof. Sci-Fi's expression hardened. Proof that a human can survive the crucible? It means nothing. One victory does not change the hierarchy. No, Kane agreed. But a revolution starts with one victory. Sci-Fi struck, his blade a silver arc in the dim light. Kane blocked, steel meeting steel with a grating screech. They moved in tight, brutal motions, punches, elbows, quick strikes meant to incapacitate. Kane's breath came fast, his muscles burning. Sci-Fi was stronger, but Kane had fought in the dirt, in the mud, against enemies who didn't play by the rules. He let Sci-Fi overextend, then twisted, slamming the hilt of his weapon into the alien's jaw. Sci-Fi staggered. Kane pressed the advantage, knee to the ribs, an elbow to the temple, each hit precise and merciless. Sci-Fi hit the ground, his weapon skittering away. Kane stood over him, blade raised. His own breath echoed in his ears, the rhythmic thud of his heartbeat a war drum. Sci-Fi looked up, a smear of blood across his sharp features. There was no fear in his eyes. Only defiance. It appears, Sci-Fi said, voice thick with pain, that I underestimated you. Kane lowered his blade. Yeah. A lot of people do. The overhead lights flared white, and the arena fell silent. The Dominion officials above leaned forward, whispers rippling through the crowd. Final trial, complete, the mechanical voice announced. Victor Kane Voss. Kane exhaled, the weight of the victory settling over him. His team regrouped, their faces a mix of relief and disbelief. As the arena doors opened, and the observation deck descended, Kane met the eyes of every Dominion leader. They saw him now. Really saw him. He had not only survived the crucible. He had redefined it. The moment Kane stepped out of the arena, he knew the real battle had just begun. The air outside the crucible's war grounds was eerily still, but the silence wasn't peace, it was tension, coiled tight and waiting to snap. He felt their eyes on him, Dominion elites, instructors, high-ranking officials, all trying to understand how a lone human had defied their expectations. He rolled his shoulders, ignoring the throbbing ache in his ribs. His team walked behind him, hesitant, unsure whether to celebrate or brace for impact. Thrix's mandibles clicked nervously, and Orin, the massive Trogar, kept casting wary glances at the shadowed corridors. They weren't the only ones waiting. Sci-Fi Atrax stood near the exit, arms crossed, posture unreadable. The bruises along his jaw hadn't faded, but his expression wasn't one of anger. It was something else. Calculation, maybe? A predator reassessing its prey. You should be dead, Sci-Fi said, his voice low. Kane smirked. Yeah. I get that a lot. Sci-Fi studied him for a long moment. Then, to Kane's surprise, he nodded. Not an acceptance. Not respect. But acknowledgement. This isn't over, Sci-Fi said. Kane's grin didn't fade. Didn't think it was. Before either could say more, a voice cut through the air, sharp, commanding. Kane Voss. The crowd parted as Commander Vekris approached. He was a high-ranking officer of the Dominion's military command, his armor a polished obsidian, marked with golden sigils of status. His gaze was unreadable, but his presence alone sent a message. Kane stood straighter, but he didn't salute. That wasn't his style. Vekris stopped a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back. You are the first human to survive the crucible. The first to defeat Sci-Fi Atrax. The first to disrupt an institution that has remained unchallenged for over a century. Kane shrugged. Guess I've been busy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Vekris remained impassive. You understand what this means? Yeah, Kane said. It means you can't ignore us anymore. A long silence. Then, for the first time, Vekris smiled. It wasn't kind. It wasn't warm. It was a strategist's smile, the kind reserved for pieces being moved on a galactic chessboard. Come with me. The offer. The chamber was stark, cold. Dominion efficiency at its finest. No wasted space, no unnecessary furniture. Just a single table, 2 chairs, and a viewport that overlooked the vastness of space. Kane sat across from Vekris, arms folded. The commander had said nothing since they entered, but Kane wasn't in a hurry. He knew power plays when he saw them. Finally, Vekris spoke. The Dominion expected you to fail. We designed the Crucible to break you. Kane smirked. Yeah, about that. Gonna need a refund. Vekris ignored the jab. You proved something today, whether you intended to or not. Humanity is adaptable. Dangerous. He leaned forward slightly. You are dangerous. Kane's grin faded slightly. He had been underestimated before, dismissed. But now, they were looking at him differently. Not as an anomaly. As a threat. Vekris continued. The Dominion does not tolerate disruption. But it values power. You've forced us to make a decision. Kane raised an eyebrow. And that is? Vekris clasped his hands together. We have 2 options. We can eliminate you now, erase this anomaly. Or we can use you. Kane's muscles tensed. Hell of a recruitment pitch. Vekris tilted his head. You misunderstand. This is not a request. The Dominion's war against the insurgents is escalating. We need commanders who can think outside of protocol. You will serve the Dominion. Kane exhaled sharply. Or you die. Silence. The weight of it pressed against Kane's ribs harder than any punch he had taken. He glanced at the viewport, the endless void beyond it. He had never been afraid of impossible odds. That's why he had come here in the first place. But this wasn't a simple fight. This was politics. And Kane hated politics. He leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on Vekris. All right, he said. I'll play. Vekris studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Then welcome to the Dominion's war, Kane Voss. The reality of war. The battles didn't wait. 2 days after the trial, Kane found himself aboard the Dreadspire, a Dominion warship stationed on the outer fringes of their contested borders. His new assignment was clear: command a task force against a rising insurgency that threatened Dominion-controlled territories. The Dominion's arrogance had cost them. The insurgents weren't just a nuisance, they were a storm brewing on the horizon. They had technology, strategy, and worst of all, they were winning. Kane stood in the command center, scanning the star maps flickering in front of him. His team, if they could be called that, stood at attention. Sci-Fi was among them, arms folded, expression unreadable. A briefing drone hovered into the room, its mechanical voice monotone. Objective: neutralize insurgent forces on outpost row 17. Resistance: estimated high. Commander Voss has full operational control. All eyes turned to him. Kane exhaled. All right then. He turned to the squad, his voice steady. I'm not here to play by Dominion rules. If you want to win, you fight my way. Sci-Fi narrowed his eyes. And what way is that? Kane smirked. We hit fast. We hit smart. And we hit them so hard they never see it coming. Silence. Then, to his surprise, Sci-Fi gave a small nod. Maybe they didn't trust him yet. Maybe they never would. But they would follow. The ship rumbled as it dropped out of hyperspace, the planet below glowing like an ember. The war had begun. And Kane Voss was ready.